Hello, and welcome to the Wonkette Weekend Live Chat. I am Robin Panacchia, and this is the lovely and talented Stephen Robinson.
Hey, Robin, how are you?
Oh, I'm peachy.
Yeah, so let's hop right into this while my wife's still watching the chat. We this whole week, the conservative author and great thinker, Bethany Mandel, had kind of publicly pantsed herself during this interview when she was asked to describe the literal subject of the book she was writing. And she's been dragged all for this week. I mean, I've done it, and
I did
obviously
it
you did
after
it.
you did.
There's a hilarious Roy Wood Jr. from The Daily Show has a
Oh,
hilarious
I did not.
bit. You have to see it. It's
I will.
it's wonderful. So I mean, I don't really want to. I'm not gonna continue this and
Very
making
liberal,
fun of her.
and probably fewer of them consider themselves to be woke. And so, when we
What does
talk
that
about
mean to
traditional
you? Would you mind defining woke? Because it's come up a couple times, and I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
So, I mean, woke is sort of the idea that this is going to be one of those moments that goes viral. I mean, woke is something that's very hard to define, and we've spent an entire chapter defining it. It is sort of the understanding that we need to totally reimagine and redo society in order to create hierarchies of oppression. It's hard to explain in a 15-second soundbite.
Yeah, look,
Wow, I
Honestly,
don't.
I find it very satisfying every single time. Like directly into my veins. I swear to God, I spend so much. I very rarely watch like 24 like cable news or whatever, because when I do it and I watch these interviews, I'm like, will you please just ask people to define the words that they are using? Please, for the love of God, if someone could just ask someone to define what they think critical race theory or woke is, and they never do it. And so I have been waiting for this for so long, and it was just as satisfying as I imagined it would be.
um she that one definition she gave, and you covered the other one and we'll get to that in a moment. The one she gave, uh it barely would not even cover what she's actually writing about in her book. And that's this larger piece, right? Like that they want woke to mean everything they hate,
Hmm.
and it
Just
becomes
in
problematic.
general.
And it becomes problematic when it's just gets they try to have to make it this one specific thing. She later, I believe, let's see, a radical belief system. This is her later description, suggesting that our institutions are built around discrimination and claiming that all disparity is a result of that discrimination. It seeks a radical definition of society in which equality of group result is the endpoint enforced by an angry mob. Um, a lot of use of radical, and as you said, all is
Hmm.
sort of
Yeah.
easily disproved. When you put in all, that's obviously easily rejected. I know we have different interpretations of the gibberish she put in, but
Well, I
some
mean, the thing that I find really interesting, honestly, is in her first comment where she was like talking about hierarchies, and the like one of the most basic differences, like from the beginning, if we're talking French Revolution style, I'm just going to stick this up there, uh, is that the right represents hierarchies, whereas the left represents equality. And that was like pretty much the whole point of everything. Like the people on the right side were like, yay, let's just keep the royal people around. We like those people. And then the people on the left were like, hey, no, let's all be equals. And that is like the very most basic definition of right versus left that exists. And what she's doing is completely not understanding that and assuming that we have the same same respect for hierarchies, I guess, and need for hierarchy that the right has, which we really don't, except for who's funnier. And that's really like, I think all anyone
Well,
is competing about. But
that's when I am, when we disagree on this, when I try to, at least, because I have to like try to examine some degree of logic that some folks have. I believe a lot of what we've seen is their belief for a lot of people that the hierarchy has shifted and that they are the oppressed ones. And we can
oh
agree
yeah,
that that's absurd, but that's how they view it. That's how so much of this is communicated, to the point that they arguably are what they are claiming to dislike. They are the ones who are woke. It's very fascinating to me because a lot of, if you look at men's rights forums or even some of the
oh
right
yeah.
wing forums, a lot of the transition is sort of about an awakening. One would argue that what people like,
Well, that's what the red
um,
pill was.
yes, I mean, that's a direct reference to um, The Matrix, of course, a film from trans women, but they don't see the irony of that they've co-opted that. But the idea that you've been awakened to the reality of the world, and that women are terrible and control everything, and minorities are terrible and control everything. And I mean, even amongst the quote unquote former liberals, so every former liberal who goes right wing or went Trumpist, they have sort of essentially a quote unquote woke narrative where they suddenly realized how effed up the world was against them if they were white or Christian or whatever. They
Yeah.
always have some story of like, you've written about Alan Dershowitz whining, similar
Well,
stuff.
also that
Like I was the
hashtag
guy.
walk away people that turned out to be like it was like 3 people in reality. It was a major AstroTurf campaign, but it was supposed to be like liberals walking away from being liberals and joining the Trump train, for whatever reason. Like they have all of those various terminologies to explain the exact, like a similar sort of thing.
Yes, and then it's not. I'm very big on saying it's important to acknowledge that certain things exist while not saying it's everything. So I think sometimes, when there was anger after Occupy Wall Street, it later festered. It was sort of, um, and then with the sort of quote unquote economic anxiety that people dismissed. I mean, these things are real. People are having sort of these feelings. So I do believe that there is, with some people, there was a sense of, there's this new hierarchy and I am being mistreated within that hierarchy. And if you live in a quote unquote very liberal area like Portland, there's a sort of that sense of you as a white woman are suddenly in a world where you're being told that everything you naturally do is wrong. Like, oh, the way you communicate. And that's been a complaint about certain
Well,
diversity and equity and inclusion seminars and things that they have. There's been examples of people of it being like, oh, well, Robin, when you communicate this way, when you use your hands, that's very mansplaining. When you do
yeah.
this, and then you're just sort of, I just feel like I'm just being myself. Why is this suddenly a negative? And we can say that those are legitimate misunderstandings or it's wrong or whatever, but it's sort of part of a undercurrent that I've witnessed that it get fed into. I think, Mandel feeds into that. It's not it's everyone, but there are a lot of people who feel as if they are part. Oh, okay, well, great. I'm going to jump on this anti woke bandwagon. I mean, what I find fascinating is that a lot of these folks, the argument that came out was that a lot of it was sort of they're attacking mainstream liberalism, but that's not the case, because if that were the case, Democrats would be embracing wokeness. They would say, oh yeah, that's just what we are, but it's not. I mean, one of our favorite guests of the show.
What's wrong with this stupid wokeness? All right, don't just look at Virginia and New Jersey. Look at Long Island. Look at Buffalo. Look at Minneapolis. Even look at Seattle, Washington. I mean, this defund the police lunacy to take Abraham Lincoln's name off of schools. I mean, that people see that, and it's just really have a suppressive effect all across the country. The Democrats, some of these people need to go to a woke detox center or something. mean, that they're expressing a language that people just don't use. And there's a backlash and a frustration at that.
He's the one who probably maybe has too much of Fox News in his house that his wife is watching, because there's this sense of the Abraham Lincoln is an example of many of these cases of quote unquote wokeness run amok. There are real examples that people will find, an extremist example, and then, but they don't look at the story where, you know, overt bigotry towards trans people, laws being passed against trans people, overt, you know, forget the defund the police argument, but like around the same time, yet again, an unarmed Black person being killed. All of this stuff is occurring, but you sort of to sort of help elevate this idea that that Abraham Lincoln is being painted as this horrible racist because he's a white man, which isn't a sort of mainstream or popular
they do
belief.
is they pick things that they know people like and then say, see, these people won't let you have that. Like the thing they always do with Blazing Saddles, which it would not work today because people also, don't regularly know who Hedy Lamarr is. And I personally find that to be a shame, but like things change. And I think what I sort of see is, I think there's a problem with people not having any kind of like filter, and also generally like just hearing bits and pieces of conversations and like internalizing them rather than listening to the whole conversation and understanding what's going on. And they're just hearing like one little bit. One thing I actually thought was kind of interesting, back to Mandel, is, we will get to this later because they were hilarious. People found a lot of her old tweets that were, fairly bananas, one of which involved her talking about how she turned off her mother's life support before it was necessary to do so. And I will say, like, I am very much in favor of like humane euthanasia. Like, I would hope that someone would care enough about me to be able to do that. I really do feel that way. But people made a few jokes about it because she's so pro-life, including Glenn Danzig, which made like my entire life. But sorry, she got really upset into this whole thing about how, people took that one thing that she said out of context and didn't understand the whole thing that went along with that, didn't read her whole book where there's a whole chapter on what she had to do and, become understanding of that in the position that she was in. And I feel like that's what the irony there is, that is what I think happens with so many different things, where people will just hear one bit and they're like, oh, I feel attacked. This is bad and weird and confusing, instead of, just listening and taking in what you think is good, filtering out what you don't think is good. Like, that is, I don't know, that's how I interact with people in general. So I very rarely get like, oh no, someone's not even, I don't really understand that reaction personally. Like, I've been in activist circles like my whole life. There are some things that people say where I'm like, I do not personally agree with that. And, I don't start a fight over it. I just personally decide that I don't. I'm okay with saying the word idiot. A lot of people are not. Like certain things. And I think that we can have healthy disagreements and have these conversations. I think the problem is the idea that we shouldn't even have the conversations to begin with. Because I think it's okay for people to, say, maybe even like, if someone did feel weird about the amount that I talk with my hands, and talk to me about that, and I could explain, why I really can't manage to, and actually, like, I can explain the entire history of why Italians do talk with their hands, and it's because there's 40 bajillion languages, or there were. Sorry, I got a little off track there. But I think that we can have those conversations without being crazy about them. Like, I was very not offended, but like, when people were getting upset about Bernie Sanders, sorry, again, not trying to scare anyone or start any fights, talking with his hands, at us and talking loudly at the debates. And I'm like, oh my God, I think a lot of these people are people who have possibly never met an Italian person or a Jewish person before. Like, I think that is a very big possibility there. And there's a cultural divide. I think that there are ways to have these conversations that aren't, everyone's bad or someone's, attacking me and trying to take my place in the hierarchy, or, where it's, not necessarily heads butting. Because I love conversations about shit I disagree with. Like,
oh, absolutely.
Bring it on.
I just want to stress, as someone who's living in the Portland area and the Seattle area, there are challenges sometimes where it is a top down. Like, how you are expressing yourself is wrong, which is sort of the flip of sort of, if you're a minority, your experience of like, when you enter this world, this is how you must behave to exist in this world. Whatever your culture was, you need to change it to function, is being flipped. And to the extent that, I've always warned, to the extent, and it's not even about wokeness, but anytime, my issue is always, no one likes fundamentalism. And neither way. No one likes fundamentalism, and no one likes snobbery, and no one likes a sense of, cultural dominance. Like, this is the right way to be or exist. And so whenever things are shifting in that way, that's bad. And there is parts of that that's being latched onto when it occurs. So that is certainly an area that I think people can improve upon in that sphere. That doesn't change. What Mandel and the others are doing is, of course, leading on the sense that any sense of acknowledgement of racism or prejudice in the world is inherently divisive or bad, or is out to get them. You had quoted, I think, Ben Shapiro, also like another genius. Wokeness claims, which it does not claim, but he's about to state, Western civilization and its institutions were and are discriminatory and serve the purposes of those in power, typically white straight men. And that discrimination is both historic and ongoing, and all group disparities are explained by it. Again, we get to the all, right? Because the all is absurd. Like, O.J. Simpson should have been in jail. I believe he did the crime. Like, the idea that he somehow got, the idea that any Black person in prison is there, unjustly. No one, I do not believe that. Have not met any Black person who believes that. We're just sort of looking at mass incarceration as a larger sphere. Similarly, are there women who would not do a good job as a CEO, would not do a good job as president, and so forth? There are many, but that does not mean that when you look at a lot of these Fortune 500 companies, or the fact that America's never had a woman president, or there's never been, they're often so misrepresented on these boards or whatever, that is not necessarily a fair equality of outcome. And I think what happens is this, especially guys like Ben Shapiro, who, as I say, if the world was equitable, he'd be homeless. So clearly something is off. He himself, maybe that's why he probably does not want a very close examination of the system that allows him to be worth, as you said, between $50 and $100 million, and to think that the things he writes, like the idea that there's no evidence that children being fed.
Yeah, that feeding children helps child hunger. Well, I mean, going back a little bit, the entire concept of Western civilization to begin with is fucked up, because they're not talking about when these people are always talking about the West, the West, the West. They're not talking about Latin America. They're not talking about South America. They're speaking very specifically about Europe and the United States. They're speaking very specifically about where the white people are. And so that is, if you're talking about that, and if that is the basis for, your entire argument that, like, oh no, you can't say that this is centered around white people, then why are you picking the land masses with majority white people?
Mhm.
And the thing is that when it's people always, see maliciousness in a lot of things. And if a whole group of people exactly like me started a country or started a business, we would start a business or a country or whatever that, made things right for us, that worked for us, that, had things that we had food and, activities that we enjoy, that sold things that we enjoy. And that's sort of a normal human thing. But what we had for many, many, many years was, were these societies that were run entirely by white men. So yes, white men did create societies primarily to benefit white men, and then everyone sort of had to just like their way in there. And that is a process that is still, we're still like we're not done with that yet. Like we're still undergoing the process of, trying to undo that in some way without, I mean, I'm in favor of dismantling the system, but not everyone else is. Um,
Didn't Shapiro's sister argue that that system is what it should be and that women should be subordinate to
oh
men?
yeah, I mean that's her whole thing in general. Although
So
she's a lot more
it's this,
famous than her husband. So
a lot of the Daily Wire folks they argue that's what they're arguing. So it's sort of this, they're kind of moving their own target. It's sort of
yeah,
like, oh no, it's not discriminatory, but actually maybe it should
it
be that
should,
white men.
ideally, like they're
Um,
actually fighting for this thing while claiming that it does not exist.
well, it's a lot of like the definitions of woke and the criticisms that we've seen. uh, They hate the 1619 Project, and what's astonishing is you read this and it's not like nothing she, the Cohenna Jones writes is that controversial or radical or even anti-American. Like you look, oh, why do you think this is anti-American? You realize that, as you were saying with Western civilization, their concept of America is white men kicking ass. That's as
Yeah,
Richard Pryor said, white men kicking ass for 200 years or so. And what she writes, she centers the idea that, well, actually, democracy was perfected by Black people. So she centers Black people. That is the story of America becoming better. And everyone freaks out, even though as if there's this somehow, and Shapiro's clowned himself and others of saying, like, well, eventually, I'm sure they would have freed. That is always on a slight tangent. That's my absurd. This idea that essentially slavery would have ended on its own as society became less agricultural based, as if like the idea that every Walmart employee
yeah.
owning, belonging to the Waltons would not be a cool idea. The idea that they
I
would
mean,
love
quite
the idea of,
frankly, Walmart is probably paying their employees less than they would spend on them if they were like actually enslaved. Like,
yes, that perhaps that would have eventually ended slavery when they realized like, oh, right, why
it's
do we?
literally cheaper to just pay people the minimum wage. That's pretty frightening. That's why we call it wage slavery. But
But I guess if you own their kids and
yeah, no,
you
that's
are,
I'm obviously not saying it's that fucked up. I'm saying in terms of bottom line,
I
like
was,
that's
my wife and I were watching a Finding Your Roots with Henry Louis Gates, and she was uh, appalled. The idea of this wasn't just Jefferson who did this, but others who took out loans for property, for home, again, building things. Literally, the collateral was human beings.
mhm, yeah.
So it's just literally so it's like you kind of like, because this is what she does. She does loans and business. So the idea is like the wealth you build from that, the ability to do that. And it's coming from the sense of I own this human being. So it's not even just literally getting this person's labor, which is terrible enough, but the sense that someone is giving you money that you use to make more money based on
Mhm.
the fact that you are committing this crime. Like I own this person, which is kind of effed up.
Give me money.
Give me money, sure. And if you don't pay the bones, I'll come back and get those people. Not you. I'll get them. Is horrific. And I understand that the anti-woke position is to sort of ignore that had literally no impact on the world today. And going back to the original Shapiro argument that we're saying that um that explains every failed Black person. No, I'm just saying that it is greatly responsible for the system we have today.
Well, the
But
insane thing to me is the idea that we should only, consider history from one perspective to begin with. Like they're like, no, this is we learned history this way, and it's not science, it's history, it's stories, it's people experience it differently to begin with. There have been many like histories written from the perspective of people who were not dominant, and who, were not the victors, as they say. And it's important to, look at history from various angles instead of being like, oh no, we're so narrow-minded. It has to be just this one thing. It has to be all about, teaching kids patriotism, which, by the way, that it really is what the function of teaching kids history for many years was. Like, it was not to actually like really educate kids about history. It was to produce children who were patriotic and, frankly, willing, once they were 18 years old, to go get their heads blown off for the greatest country in the world. The poor ones, anyway. And I think that there is this fear that if you teach kids or anyone history from a different perspective, they will not be as blindly patriotic. They will not be as willing to put up with your shit, and be less, they will not think, oh wow, that white guy really earned, that rich white guy really like earned everything he got. That Nepo baby, good job on him. Like, I think there is that terror, and there's always the terror, like from the, upper classes, however you want to put that, the people at the bottom are going to pull the ladder out from under them and get on top of it themselves.
yeah, they've always blamed, the civil rights movement. Conservatives claimed it was all a communist plot. Even to the extent that communists were involved, you can't really fault the descendants of capitalism's greatest crime, slavery, to sort of be, maybe this isn't a great thing. Maybe a system where I am not a slave or second-class citizen, where I am at least being presented equality, is alluring to me. But there's no unpacking of it. No unpacking of any of this. So they use terms like Marxism and so forth without any kind of awareness of it. Slight tangent from the woke debate, but slightly about wokeness in a way, because you and I had both written about the in South Carolina, where they put forward the death penalty for women who, or anyone who had an abortion. And Nancy Mace specifically was kind of growing on her crying jag about it, as if she wasn't part of the system, that this was, of course, the end result. And the reason I say this, South Carolina has the death penalty. It has always had the death penalty. I would think that in a country where the guy literally just driving the getaway car was sometimes even unaware what was happening, was still given the death penalty as a result of a felony being, the murder being committed, would probably execute people who commit contract killings. In our current legal system, contract premeditated murder is like, yeah, you're done. And that is what, if you pass these personhood amendments, that's what abortion becomes. And that was always the case. That's been the case forever. Maybe I was the only way not taking the crazy pills, but I think, and you and I always said this is what will happen if you pass this bill. And Nancy Mace, not Marjorie Greene, because she's too scary, but it was Nancy Mace and all those other suburban white Republican women were always trying to say, oh, no, we will somehow create this invasive law saying that you can't control your body based on the idea that what's in your body is a person, but somehow all of our other laws related to what happens if you terminate a human life won't apply. Like, where is the logic in this, Robin?
Well,
Beyond,
at the end of the day, it's not really they're not looking at it as a logical position. They're looking at it as a negotiation in a way. They know that that is what their people want. They want abortion to be illegal. And there are people who haven't, like, a lot of people who want abortion to be illegal are not people who have thought about it too deeply. And I don't mean that like in a mean way, but there are people who just automatically have been raised with, or, you know, they're just like, oh, well, killing a baby is bad. Babies are cute. Like, that's bad.
I think about it in a mean way. Sorry. I think about it in a mean way. Well, because isn't the whole Republican argument, and this is a way that I get people accuse me of being somewhat right-wing. So whenever someone suggests a law, no matter how well-meaning it is, I'm sort of like, what problem is this law solving? Will it solve the problem? And what is the ramification of that law? Specifically, are you willing to see the police kill someone because of that law? So even when folks are saying there should be an anti-catcalling law, yes, catcalling sucks. Are you willing
I did
to see
not
the
like
police?
that's bad. No.
Are you willing to see the cops kill someone for catcalling? Because you have to expect that this will be an escalation, that's given the police force that we have. And then given same with these abortion laws, if you are proposing this law, what will it stop
what
the bad thing to
actual
happen?
consequences of it? And a lot of the time, you know, these people were like, well, it's not my business what the consequences are. You know, I know that this is bad. And, you know, like, that's actually one of the arguments that I have with people about the death penalty all the time. And I'm like, okay, yes, I realize that you really want to execute Ted Bundy, but like, the problem with the death penalty is that we do execute innocent people, and we do execute people who are, you know, developmentally disabled, and you're not going to get to have the death penalty where it's just Ted Bundy. I'm sorry, it's not going to happen. So you either have to be against the death penalty, or be like, I don't care if we kill a few innocent people, which I do think a lot of people do hold that opinion. In fact, one of the biggest advocates for the death penalty, who I can't think of his name right now, he did that terrible documentary about the guy who was on death row, who wouldn't, whatever, but this guy who was like very pro death penalty was like, it's okay that we kill a few innocent people, I think, because then it deters people from doing bad stuff. Or not.
Oh, there's no real evidence of that. And I guess that's the these laws won't make abortion go away. And as I say, like, replace abortion with gun for some of these right wingers. Yes, it's I mean, to be fair, their argument is sort of, this is the ultimate, this person's committed the ultimate, and they should be removed from society or protect, you know, I can't justify why people support the death penalty, but their argument sometimes, it's like, I've seen it from folks on the right that this prevents these people from committing future crimes, or they commit the ultimate crime. That's very Minority Report to me. I feel like that's how you should do it. Life in prison is pretty crappy, considering
I actually don't believe that should exist either, but I actually don't believe prison should exist to begin with. So I'm all on the other side of that. But
well, your hippy dippy, you know, killers running free positions.
Not really how it works.
We have to win some elections here, Robin.
Some very like pleasant contract killers or whatever. I don't know if it's a contract killer, but whatever they're called. Very nice people, and they let me wear their rings. And they're dead now, so I can say that.
Well, I have no knowledge of these contract killers, despite my connection to you,
I'm
Robin.
kidding.
So I want to make sure when you're hauled away.
No, you know, hey, it's not like they're doing it for fun. It's their job, okay? But how is it that different from people who are cops, I guess, and kill people? No. But you know, I think this idea, people want things to be universal in this way that things are never going to be universal. There's never going to be, you know, this world that the anti-woke people want, where everyone is still putting up with their shit. Like, it's not going to happen. There's also not going to be the world that the people, who consider themselves reasonable want, where no one ever says anything stupid or obnoxious. Like, that's not going to happen either.
Yeah.
There, we have to be able to, figure out like where we're okay with things being, sort of gray areas, really. Like, we need nuance, and we need to not flip out over, stupid shit.
And back to Nancy Mace, I know I'm saying this as just a man here, but I just find her position repulsive. Like, it's typical Republican. She, unfortunately was a victim of rape, and so she sees the idea of her having been forced to carry that child, that pregnancy to term, is barbaric. And of course, she sees how that would have, of course, completely derailed whatever life planned or whatever. But I think it's no less, no more barbaric to force anyone to carry a pregnancy to term, and has the same impacts on their lives and the same impact, even if it was, the most romantic, consensual sex possible. If you didn't, we're still talking about the next 9 months of forced servitude. That to me is barbaric. And so this distinction she's trying to make, or she's somehow horrified that somehow it's just that this would be the justifiable case of killing what she believes is a person because of who that person's father is, which I think probably goes back to any sort of gross slave laws I'm sure they had back in the time. It's just somewhat really offensive.
That goes up because I like compliments. Well, I think the thing with Mace is the thing that I actually see happening a lot now with Republican politicians is that they're like, no, we wanted this to be a law, but like the nice way. We don't want, like all these laws are going through and then all these women are, going into sepsis because doctors are afraid to give them needed abortions when they are in, medical danger. We're seeing, the thing that happened this week where they couldn't figure out how to teach Rosa Parks in Florida. They were like, do we just say she didn't want to change her seat in general? Like, she was just like kind of a jerk and didn't feel like getting up for someone. Like, it's this very, oh no, we didn't mean for it to go badly. We didn't mean for like the whole, like, actual, we wanted it to just be like, we passed this law and then we're heroes and it's cool. Like, and then nothing bad ever happens as a result.
Oh yeah. Especially because, Rosa Parks, we're talking in the 1950s, right? In Alabama. And we've discussed that Doctor Who episode where literally that's a more hostile environment for the Black time traveler than anywhere.
I'm sorry. There we go.
But yeah, I mean, that is, how do you discuss what had actually took place there without mentioning, of course, this is this area of apartheid, some of the most brutal rules of second-class citizenship and standards, and you can't justify it. You can't explain it. And if you're a decent person, so the white kid hears this and is horrified, and he comes back, probably will ask, Grandpa, are you cool with this? Or Grandma, and that's uncomfortable. Would you have forced her to give your seat? What do you do? And so I think that those are the conversations that these folks don't want to have. They get it.
I mean, I remember when I was a kid and I was like, wow, this is like fucking terrible. I feel like, and I was like, wow, I feel horrible. And I was like, 7 years old, just like having regular conversations with my mom. And I'd be like, wow, I do feel terrible. And I didn't, just have bad like self-esteem for my entire life. I was like, hey, I will work really hard to not be this and to, be kind to people. And it wasn't really that hard. It wasn't, oh my God, my self-esteem was destroyed forever. Clearly I'm okay. Doing just fine.
Yeah,
on the
they
self-esteem front.
they have trouble coping with these subtleties,
Well, they
I
don't want
think.
complicated questions. They don't want their kids coming home and asking them complicated questions because, frankly, they're not swift enough to answer the complicated questions. Um, you know, they
The yeah, I mean
they don't
that
want their kids to come home and dislike them or be like, "Hey, it appears that you are an asshole." Like, I mean, I guess I was lucky in the way that like my parents weren't assholes. So like,
you
I
sure
wasn't like, man, screw you guys, because they were pretty okay. But
well,
I guess if your parents, yeah,
institutionalized bigotry is very hard for most the average American.
yeah,
So it's one, even um, if you watch even movies, there's something as silly as like Sherlock Holmes' smarter sister type stuff. I think which is a TV show
yeah,
that airs.
it is, yeah, with
Usually,
Enola Holmes, with the girl from Stranger Things.
the concept is always to present that, okay, well, things were effed up in the past, but if you were smart and plucky enough, you could have broken through which unfortunately is not always the case. Like, no matter how, in many cases, a if you were sort of 19th century Robin, it doesn't end well. Sort of the Edith Wharton
Yeah,
novel. It's like that your spirit's broken. It's sort of, I've always said, like, the idea that for a lot of people, white and black, I think there's the idea that like somehow in the mid 60s or something, like black people suddenly started to become fundamentally different than they were. It's like, well, no, you're just a human. Like,
yeah,
no human is born wanting to be a slave. Like, you're essentially, every new person, the crime has to be committed of breaking that person's spirit and their hopes and their dreams and making them an enslaved person, which is horrible. And that was for
yeah,
centuries. And so I think when you actually write about it and write about the things that have occurred, I remember writing a review for the documentary Exterminate All the Brutes about US imperialism. And some guy's response was sort of, what am I supposed to do with this? What I can, why do we have to dwell in the past? What am I supposed to do about? But we dwell in the past all the time. We have monuments
past
and
is fucking
statues.
interesting. Like, I mean, not interesting, but like it helps inform freaking everything. Like that's you don't know the past, you're doomed to repeat it. That's a very like well-worn saying, but there's a reason for it. It's why we don't have many, too many toddler tsars around anymore other than Trump. So, at least we've moved on from that.
Yeah, I mean, but a lot of what Trump has tapped into, I mean, going back to wokeness, is a sense of these young men who feel like the world is turned against them, that they're being mistreated and it's unfair. And it's what I find fascinating about all of this is like, when I was growing up, and obviously I'm not trying to say it was wonderful and pleasant in the 80s and 90s, but often it was sort of on the left, you're sort of, hey, let's make things nicer for minorities type of law. And then conservatives are like, oh, we don't need that law, not because you suck, but our official statement is everything's wonderful and great.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's sort of the shift has been Republican like DeSantis and others are affirmatively passing or trying to like openly Jesse Helms style saying, we want to pass laws to make things worse for minorities.
Oh, yeah.
And while claiming that we are the victims. DeSantis says something that I found fascinating where he was talking about his weird psychotic definition of freedom. So sort of the free state of Florida also includes the freedom to be free and safe from the pathologies of the left. So the idea is that we want to be free of your very existence, which, if you read history, whenever rhetoric like that is expressed, it usually doesn't go well.
No, not so much. Does not generally end well. I think the thing with we were discussing this earlier. I think the thing with Carville and those other, sort of let's mar, and that's like let's be really like we'll be Democrats and we'll be liberals, but we won't be woke. We won't scare anyone. Sort of comes from this, very, 90s Democrat idea, 90s, 2000s, I would say, idea where it was, you were supposed to assume that the Democrats were on the good side, but just weren't saying anything so as not to like tip off the fuzz. I'm not, or, scare the suburbanites. Like you were supposed to assume that Obama was secretly for same-sex marriage, but just couldn't say it because he had to, take that vegetable and put it into the mashed potatoes so that people would have eat it eventually. It was supposed to be that graciousness that you gave people and did not actually complain that much. Like you weren't supposed to complain that much. And if you did complain, you were kind of annoying. You were kind of pissing everyone off and ruining everything. And now a lot of people are ruining everything and they don't know what to do. And it feels like chaos.
Well, that's the Obama argument. For those who would make that argument, was like, obviously Obama never could have won in 2008 on a pro same-sex marriage platform.
Weirdly,
Bush
did.
had attacked it. I'm sorry.
Bill Clinton originally supported same-sex marriage, I believe. Like actual.
Yeah.
And then,
but I mean, he
yeah.
did not. He was not. That was clearly by Still Nice Hotel. He like executed a mentally challenged person. He beat up a black lady personally. So he clearly was sort of did the stuff you do to get elected.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
The centrists believe that you do to get elected. And then you suddenly, it's like, oh, well, because he did this and kept it on the stealth, he was able to nominate Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and then Obama kept it on the stealth, was able to then nominate Kagan and Sotomayor. And that's what gets you that ruling later. And it's obviously a version of events that discounts the effect of activism on the grounds to shape public opinion.
Because people do need to be pushed. And, I think what people don't really understand, even like the people on our side, not every single idea that someone tosses out has to be, and this is the rule now. And I think it's a very disingenuous approach to assume that. Like, I disagree with people all of the freaking time. People, we disagree with each other. That's normal. But it's this very disingenuous thing I think that people do to people that they kind of want to shut up. And they're just like, wow, so everything you say has to be the rule now? And I think that that's sort of where a lot of those people are going, where, they're not, it's just a little disingenuous is what I'm saying. Like they know that no one's saying, and this is the rule now, even if people are very blustery on social media. Like you can ignore people if you think they are wrong.
Oh yeah. And there's an argument for incrementalism that they make, and they say that it has results, and for good or for ill. It's a very complex thing, whether you agree with it or not.
Also, the people that they're mad about do not have that much power. I would just like to be very clear on that. Like the people that they're, claiming, oh, they're doing all this woke stuff and they're scaring, people and they're scaring all the normies. They're not people with a ton of power. They're people with Twitter accounts who usually do not have, all the money, all the, actual power to get anything done other than just exist.
I've just seen from the trolls I've seen, they said that just anyone mentioning this causes Democrats problems, and that Democrats have to operate under different rules, which isn't necessarily doesn't make any sense. You sort of make the rules yourselves.
No, they want to operate under those rules. They do want people to shut up because they are kind of, and they've got their shit as well. Like they do kind of want people to shut up a little bit.
Because, common political, I'm not hardly the political strategist Carville is, but I would argue that certainly adopting the right's own rhetoric, especially regarding wokeness, and elevating some extremist examples that are ridiculous is not wise. So even your best never Trumper, for instance, or the closest you get to one who's elected, your Susan Collins or your Mitt Romneys, when they do speak out against Republicans, they don't necessarily elevate liberal rhetoric or call out specifically all kind of voters or silliness or whatever. They're very narrow in their targeting. They sort of understand what they're doing there. So this whole idea is like there was a point where everyone complaining about wokeness was a Democrat.
A thing just occurred to me and popped into my head here. They always say the woke mob. They never say anyone specifically. And I think that is kind of a little bit of a problem. It's, this just mass of people. We don't know who they are, but they are, imposing all these rules upon us.
Well, no one likes mobs.
Rather than they're never saying this, when we criticize what the right is saying, we're talking about people who have huge spheres of influence. Yes, you guys may get annoyed if we do too many articles on, Michael Knowles or Ben Shapiro in 1 week because they're saying a lot of really fucked up shit. But they have huge spheres of influence. The people that, the hypothetical woke mob that's made up of just nameless, faceless people who scare people randomly and we don't really know who they are, but they exist. And oh my God, there's no specifics there. There's no actual proof that they are, influential. I get a lot of hate mail. I get crazy people, writing me letters. I could show you a pretty fucked up one that I got a couple days ago. A lot of the C word there, but I'm not going, it's an entire mob that wants to silence me. Those are some fucked up people. But what they're doing is they're universalizing it into a nameless, faceless mob where they don't have to say anyone specifically. They don't have to cite any actual quotes or words. It's just this amorphous blob that they are angry at and would like to make stop. Sorry.
Oh, sure. I mean, and they did a good job. Because if you go again to Bethany Mandel's original definition about she's describing Republicans, she's describing the right, and she's describing the idea that there's a God forbid you describe the people who oppose COVID regulations or who opposed teaching Black history at school board meetings, that they are a mob, even though they were, and they actually did major changes to policy. There's no the woke mob, there's no major change to policing or police reform, even though Republicans claim that occurred. It didn't. But COVID policies pretty much drastically changed because of the anti-mask or the anti-regulation mob. And of course the Virginia was able to be flipped in part because of that mob. So they do very well. Yes, it is a rhetorical. It is a rhetorical trap. I mean, no one likes mobs. No one. It puts the others on the defense, and so I think there's a benefit to Democrats somewhat adopting that language. But keep in mind that Republicans are what I think Republicans, I would say, do well is defending. One would argue that there's no way that Republicans, they could never get away with defending these screaming lunatics at these school board meetings, but they did.
Yeah.
And I think whenever someone says, well, they operate under different rules than Democrats, what they're really saying is, oh, look, these liberals are usually women of color or queer or whatever, and these radicals, Martin Luther Green looks like a suburban person. She's a white person, so she can get away with more. To the extent that that's true or not, okay, but don't give up. Don't pretend that this is the only reason we can fight, especially when you claim to support people of color and minorities. You sort of understand that is clearly how the game is rigged, so that they will make people protesting and into police violence as a angry mob because they're scared of Black people, but some lunatic at a school board meeting, that's just an upset dad because he's a white guy.
It's a concerned moms for America. I hate the word concerned now. I really do. I do. They made me like just like I twitch a little bit when I hear it, even when it has nothing to do with people being mad about gay people in commercials.
Well, yeah, I mean that's now we can close that up on that because I think that's it's most of this is this idea of wokeness is always this acknowledgement that other people exist. I think there was
I do agree with that. Yes. By calling it a mob, it becomes unreasonable for anyone to ask for a citation to a specific person. Yes, that is what they're doing. And we need to keep asking them for specifics. That's where they fail. Okay, sorry.
yeah,
Go ahead.
Kryptite keeps interrupting my thoughts.
I know, but I have my favorites though.
Thank you. Well, since Kryptite's no longer interested in hearing what I have to say, no, I kid. We will let's close it up for now. And what do you have going on for tomorrow?
Tomorrow I am doing surprise. Guess why this Idaho hospital is closing their labor and delivery unit?
Yes. Well, that no one could have imagined the impact the Supreme Court's
Yes.
decision might have had.
No, what? No, it's just it comes out of nowhere, absolutely nowhere. And what do you got going on?
Just Trump's pants shitting meltdown yesterday, which I found amusing that people insist was some part of some kind of clever strategy. Like he actually wants to get indicted so he could easily win the no. He's very upset. Like he's not that smart. Like he only expresses the emotion he is feeling at that moment. So and next week's movie is Tampopo. I remember seeing in college. Enjoyed it.
I don't know what that is.
I enjoyed it. So thanks everyone. Enjoy next week's movie night.
Thank you guys.